Finding the right site to build your house is going to be your first consideration. One, of course, needs to consider what you're going to shelter yourself from. But a lot of time should be spent in finding the right place to build. Some shelters are built just for an evening or a night. Some are built for several days. The ones we'll cover here will be more of a long-lasting shelter. But even if you were to build for just overnight, you'd want to protect yourself from, well, rain would be the most that you'd be looking to protect from. So the procedures that we'll show here should be followed. On this first house, the only real rule we had set for ourselves before we went out was that we wanted to use a rock ledge and utilize it for at least one wall, or possibly two, of our shelter. This is perfect. Jerry's going to check it over to find out for sure, but we have two walls. A lot of rocks to clean out, a lot of rocks to use to help build more walls. We have a good 2.5 feet height, which will comprise the south wall. And on the right side of your screen, on Jerry's left, would be the west wall, naturally made. Once we've decided on the site, we need to clean up the floor a little bit. Now, if the ground was smooth, we would leave just the leaves and grass as we found it. But there's so many rocks that we had to pull everything up, and we cleaned this right on down to dirt. Level floor you'll want for comfort sleeping. You can always import grass and leaves or something for a cushioning or an insulating barrier. Now this corner on the bottom right, now we'll get back to that in a moment. These rocks will build up into a wall of its own on the north and east side. A lot of materials will need to be gathered. Grass is plentiful, so we'll use that for a good part of our covering. We'll have plenty of need for rocks. We're going to lay up a rock wall, and as you'll see shortly, we're going to build a chimney. On the north and east sides, we laid rock up to build walls, and as a mortaring substance, we utilized grass in between because it gave a completely airtight seal, also insulating from cold. Big thing, of course, is don't get your fire too close to it. Here on the south side, on the top of the ledge, a good chance of water running in. We built a berm of dirt and rocks. Now that particular berm you see here is going to divert the water that will shed from that side of the roof. Here we've got a main support beam put across. The major uprights, this one is stuck into the crevice that was in the rock, wedged in tight with rocks. The other was just pushed into the ground and supported by other rocks. Then we stuck in branches from two angles to secure this from rocking back and forth. Put another in the middle, an upright to support. And again, cross bracing. That's the east end there. We'll refer to directions. And down below, Bill is developing a spring and bringing up some clay, which we're going to use pretty quick, and building up of a chimney of sorts. Gathering the materials. Pile of rocks. Lots of sticks. We'll need sticks in anything you build. Grass. Fortunately, we're in the prairies. And long thatching grass. This, I pointed out earlier, was a natural crevice in the rock. It's on the southwest corner, where the south and west walls come together, and a perfect vent for a chimney. So we plan on building our fire in that corner, which will heat the rock, which will heat the shelter. And of course, smoke is vented through the roof of shelters, but we just were playing around. We had the opportunity. We built a chimney. We gathered clay and rocks and covered up the chamber for where the fire is, and laid some up to make a short chimney. Not a real tall, effective one, but if the wind's just right, this chimney will act to vent of its own. One pole holding up the rocks of our fire pit is a green piece of hard dogwood, so it won't burn quite as readily, and it will keep our fires small. And to keep rain from washing down in the goose downer, we'll place a big rock on top as a rain cap. And if it's not raining, we can lay that rock on the edge to divert the wind. Now the wall, or the gable, the west wall, closest to where the chimney's coming out, if we got a decent fire and sparks going, we didn't want grass. So we elected to dig up some sod and place it in place along in the west gable. Will give basically a fireproof end. We'll fill up any cracks in between with grass or dirt. Now rafters. They're cut to length. You don't want them protruding above because rain will hit them and follow down inside. This pole here is on the north side. It supports the rafters at the bottom that lays on top of the rock wall we built. The rafters come down either a Y onto it or stick underneath of it. Lashing in spots just to make sure it isn't too flimsy. The horizontal pieces which will support our grass roof, we naturally have to lash in place. Here we're using basswood bark. It's convenient. We built right above a spring, so we have easy access to water. Clove hitch is a pretty handy knot for holding lashings. Geri's placing a bar on top of more sod to be placed on the rafters on the south end. This we're hoping will divert more water. We can't trench into solid rock, and so we will berm earth and logs and rocks to try to divert it. Now with the roof and the east wall, we did not thatch as far as tying the grass bundles in place. We just laid the grasses on top. More security would have been if we'd lashed it, but we're going to lash later. But if you're short of materials, it's just another method of building a house. Tremendous amount of material is used. There's a lot more time spent gathering than in the actual building. Pieces of bark on the very peak will help to divert some water and also help to compress and hold the grasses down. And there's always the possibility of a strong wind blowing that away since it's not tied in. So logs and limbs are brought in, leaned up against it. Plenty of them. And this keeps the wind from blowing it away. Of course, here in Kansas, we get some pretty good winds. real house, ready to move in. Inside measurements are 8 foot long, 6 foot high, and 6 foot wide. Tightening needs to be done. This house is ready to move in. You've just seen us build a shelter from start to finish, from finding a site to completion of roof and having a fire inside. Now, we spent, 3 of us working on that, probably 2 days to complete it, but remember we were videotaping and photographing this as we went, and that slowed us down. It would have taken us a good part of a day to build that particular shelter. Other shelters we're going to show you here shortly, a couple of them you can build in just a matter of hours. It's the concept of what we're building is what we're trying to get across to you, not any particular rules if you build a wall this way or roof this way or find this as an ideal site and this is the ideal material. We want to show you a concept of what you can go gather wherever you are and include that to build yourself a walls and roof to protect you from whatever you're protecting yourself from. So we need to decide what is a shelter. We need to go through that, which we will, and you've seen. And what do we want it to protect us from? It decides basically what our shelter is. We want to be protected from rain or wind or snow or cold or heat or sun. We show in this tape how to protect yourself from rain and snow and cold, how to have a integral fire. Some are right in the shelter and some in conjunction with the shelter. So we feel if you can protect yourself from the cold and from the rain especially, if you can keep yourself dry or reasonably dry in a shelter, and then you can certainly keep yourself cool. You can build something to protect you from the sun or the wind. The wind is a piece of cake to protect yourself from compared to water. So we're going to show you, or we have shown you some, we're going to show you more of how to do this. Now when we think of shelters, we think of 6 things that make up a shelter. And I'll list these real quick. We've got the site area where you're going to build it, the floor of the shelter itself, walls, roof, a way to vent the smoke, and a way for you to get in and out of, and a door, which goes with the entranceway. The site preparation, a lot of people ignore that completely. They go out and they want to build a shelter, they build it. They don't give any thought as to where or why. Well, you want your site to protect you as much as your shelter protects you, so you need to protect your shelter. If you're trying to be protected from the driving rains that come basically from the west out here in this part of the world, you want to possibly get a shelter built of some sort on the west side of your shelter, which will help break up this wind and snow and rain that's pushing towards you, whether it's a high hill or a cliff or a line of trees, something to protect you, protect your shelter. But you have to be careful also, and that is because if you get a little rise in water or real heavy rain, you want yourself on a rise, a slight rise. Ideally, you'll have a little hummock of some sort, and your shelter will sit right on this hummock. And so any water shed from your shelter will continue going off. If you have a high side comes down, then you have a hummock on 3 sides, not 4, and your water sheds down, and rain comes down, it's going to go into your shelter. So you need to divert this around there somehow. To me, we spend more time looking for a spot, the ideal little spot to place this house, than we sometimes do in actually constructing. Also, you're protecting yourself from below, but also you have to think of yourself from above. You get yourself underneath the wrong trees, or trees with a lot of dead limbs, or cliff face with rocks above, stuff can fall down on top of you. Cottonwood trees, I kind of steer away from those when I come around them, and I'll camp in the meadow rather than amongst a bunch of cottonwood trees, because I've seen them fall over for no reason whatsoever. Trees do fall. You walk in the woods, you'll see trees are falling. Limbs come from trees. You don't want to be underneath them when they come down. So site selection is kind of critical. Sometimes you don't have much choice, but think a little bit. Floor, generally in all these shelters, and generally in all of our shelters, is nothing but dirt. And we'll pile in some leaves or grasses or something. There's an insulating barrier from the ground, the coolness. But we generally, a lot of times in our part of the world where it's rocky, you'll see, we have to pull this grass out of the way to begin with to get rocks up and get it smooth, and then we'll pile grasses back in on top of it. And the next two go kind of together, walls and floors. Generally in primitive shelters, they are one. There's a gradual transition from walls to, or not walls and floors, but walls and roofs. There's a gradual transition. And I like to think of as walls are basically your verticals, and your roofs would be wherever you have a slant leaning in. Well, protecting from water, which is the hardest element that we're protecting ourselves from, rain, when water hits the slanted roof, now as soon as water hits, it's falling down, as soon as it hits, it's going to stop its motion temporarily. It's going to splatter or whatever, but it's still going to continue to want to go straight down. So what we want to do is divert that. So if you've got water coming down here and it hits your slanted roof, it'll hit, splatter, and then roll down slightly. And it's continually going to go down. The secret of building this roof is to build it in such a way that by the time the water ekes its way through, going on its journey down, that it's past the wall of your shelter. So then there are several ways to accomplish this. We'll show you some. Walls, on the other hand, basically, or vertical, straight up and down. When water dries in, however, from the side, whatever, the wind blowing it, it hits it, splatters, and then it goes down. Hit, splatter, down. That's gravity. That's the way it works. So you're trying to, on a wall, it doesn't have to be near as watertight as on a roof because of that particular concept. Protecting from wind, as soon as wind hits, it'll shift a little bit and break up and dissipate. It won't be anymore. So building walls is not quite as critical as far as holding out the elements as a roof is. So bear this in mind as we go. Then you have a means to let the smoke out. All these shelters, all these shelters, we have basically a chimney built into it of some sort. A hole in the roof, or in one you just saw made, we have an actual small chimney outside, which will vent some of the smoke. It was there, so we used it. If we built it up as high as the top of the shelter, it would have actually gone like a regular chimney. We're not into building real houses. But when you're using primitive materials for your shelters, your roof lines, smoke will seep through it. As smoke rises, it'll reach up towards the top unless there's a wind diverting it at the door at the lower level. The smoke will rise, go up, and it'll seep, go on through your shelters. So what you're trying to do is make a roof high enough so when the smoke goes up and it hesitates slightly before it goes out, it's above your head. So if I want a house where I can sit down like this in a chair, well, I want my roof to be a couple feet higher than my head, or maybe even more. Generally, we sit on the ground, so the roof doesn't have to be quite as tall. All of these shelters that we've constructed here, with the exception of one, we can all just about stand up in. One is 7 foot tall, we can. The other is basically 7 foot, we can. The one you saw just made, I can stand with a slouch. Jerry can stand at the very peak inside. So you got a way to get your smoke out. If your walls that come up however high they are allow wind to come through, this is going to blow the smoke from your fire around, and it's going to be uncomfortable inside. If you have an airtight chamber a couple feet up, and then the wind won't hit that fire, so your smoke is going to rise that far before it's affected by any wind. So if you've got pretty well wind-tight shelter, the smoke is going to go straight up and dissipate out. Which brings us to our number 6, which is our entranceway. You need some way to get in and out of your shelter. The ones we describe are to be used basically repeatedly, so you're just not crawling inside of a log and pulling leaves in to help you. We have regular houses, but we have. So you've got an opening to come in and out of. You need a way to block this. So we've shown a couple simple type doors. We haven't shown anything with animal skins, a deer skin or a cowhide or something you've got could make a real good door. It actually could make good shelters too. We didn't get into this as far as materials. Which brings us to materials. That's our next subject. Okay, there's snow. There's some real perfect, beautiful houses made from snow. We don't touch it. We don't get the snow here to work with. We get some, but nothing that we have to be worried about. There's material available to show you how to build igloos or snow caves. Generally found in almost any primitive circumstance, you're going to have rocks and sticks and grasses and dirt and sod. If you're in the forest, you've got litter off the floor and leaves and sticks. This is what we're working with on this tape. But the majority of people are going to have. We don't have anything for desert shelters. You can utilize same concepts, but it's hard to build a house out of sand. You have to dig a hole in the ground. So, like we're trying to show you concepts that you can apply any place you go, not just a set bunch of rules that say, okay, now I need this is my blueprint. I need to do this. I need to do that. We don't have blueprints when we build houses. These 4 shelters that we built to illustrate this tape in the book, none of them followed exactly our basic plan or concept, because we don't set a basic plan. We have a concept in mind, and we approach it, and we build ourselves a shelter to protect us. I want to talk on a few pretty important concepts dealing with materials. One, water flows downhill. Yes, so if you have a stump of grass, you'll see that when we utilize grasses in one spot, there's shatter cane or corn-type stalks we utilize. We don't put them on the shelter upright like this. We put them on upside down because water flows downhill. It hits and it flows down. This has got a ready path all the way down the flow. If it was upside down, water would hit, come down, and find a contact point. The 2 leaves come together or something sticks out. As soon as it finds that point, it stops its flow and it drips, which brings it to its next course, or on you, which you may be the next course. So you'll find yourself turning things upside down when you're building shelters. This is a pretty important rule to remember. Another real important rule that is forgotten a lot by people is by utilizing branching materials. They go out and they see weeds. This is a weed, and it's got shelter building capabilities to it. And so they get a truckload of this and pile it on. Well, you can pile this all day long. If you have one that's branching, this branch is going to prevent you from sealing up spaces. It gives you air spaces in between. These air spaces are water diversionary places. They're going to fall down inside. So you need several feet of material like this to protect you from rain, and that may not do it. Anytime you have a stick sticking out of your shelter, water hits it and it comes down this inside. There's no way of stopping it. So you need to take and strip your weeds or find weedless sticks and utilize this in your shelter. This also is cordage material. But utilize something clean like this. You get a pile of straight sticks together, you've got a lot better sealing than if you have any of these. You get one branchy thing in and you can't seal up all these outers. You've got to eliminate these to make it watertight. You can divert some wind this way, but not water. And something which is a material, let's back up here for a second on materials. A lot of these shelters, in fact, I think every one of these shelters, we use some sort of lashing material in there. So knowing or having on hand a bunch of cordage or string, or knowing how to obtain it, is, it's not vital, but it sure makes things easier when you come to tying stuff together. This is bark off the basswood tree, and there's plenty of things in nature that offer cordage material. You check out our book and video on cordage, and you'll learn a lot of these. This is velvet leaf, which is just a weed, and again it strips, and we use strips of this, basically bark from this plant, to lash. So a lashing material is important. And I'm going to back up just a second again onto roofs. So we're shedding water. And a flat roof, even in modern times, will leak pretty good. So water hits and it's got no place to go but stay there and go down. So you want a pitch to your roof. Water hits and it rolls down. So the steeper your pitch, the faster it's going to shed water. Of course, you get too steep, you got walls. And then you're not worried about it, but the water's going to come in. You eventually got to bring it in to a roof. You'll notice on these shelters, the one we built and the three to follow, the pitch of the roof. It's pretty important. That's where the leaks are going to happen. Materials again, back on down, a concept on materials is you can take several feet thickness, we'll go to roofs, of branches this thick, and when the water hits, it flows around this, comes down, hits your next one, flows around, comes down. So it takes more layers of this to shed water than it will take of smaller diameter stick. This and this are about the same diameter, but water hits this and it's broken up and it flows around all these little diameter sticks on its journey down out of your house. So this will shed water better than this. And let's continue on down the line to the bottom. Grasses will shed water better than your sticks. Used in conjunction, we put the coarser ones towards the inside of the house, on the inside. And then we put the finer ones on the outside. And so it will shed. And if we have enough, we put finer ones, then coarser, and then finer again. And of course, we have all fine materials, we'll utilize that. That will work much better. We got leaves and short, gnarly grasses. This is typical of what you find in a primitive or forest situation. These do shed water. They just need to be thicker. You have more contact points. Water hits and it doesn't go very far at all. Hits another point, drops, hits, drops, hits, drops. And you just need a thicker layer of these materials to protect you on a roof from falling water. So now that we've gone over basically the concepts, give you an understanding of what we're doing, what we have done, and what we're going to be doing here, hopefully give you a good understanding of shelters in general. Let's go on and build some now, okay? And we'll describe some of what we're doing as we go. Okay, now we're going to get into constructing some different shelters here. And we've gathered up a whole pile of materials. We got basswood bark, plenty of sticks. We'll be constructing several different frameworks. And you can't believe the amount of grass that's necessary. This is tall slough grass or blue stem grass. There's several different tall grasses that would work. There's cattails, which are rather plentiful in most areas around the country. There's a pile of just plain grass. It's been, we just grubbed out. It's just shorter material. We can make it work. First shelter we're going to work on here this morning is probably what one would find set up in a hurry in a wild situation in the timber. And it's going to be a wickiup made of just sticks laid together. There'll be possibly some lashing with our bark. And notice that we placed it on a slight hillock. So any water that comes down will drain away. Well, the top is just wedged together. There's a V in a couple of the poles wedged together. And it's pretty solid, and we'll fill up space in between and then cover it up to make it as waterproof as possible. This morning's going to be a good test of shelter because we've got about 40 degrees and rain. Well, you're going to notice from the mud and the water, we probably should have finished the shelter a little bit earlier. But take note that where the house is sitting is slightly higher. We will trench there in the west and across on the north slightly. Just even walking would do it. If the covering was up on that now, the inside would be dry. Water would shed from that, come down, hit the ground, and run off in all directions away from the house. What we're doing here is putting an outer wall. I'm putting supports in right now where we're going to have a 6 or 8 inch gap to fill up with debris to create the outer wall of our house. twofold. It'll show you another method of building a wall. And it would save a lot of thatching material on the roof. Now, in between these ribs, these are the major ribs that hold the house, make the house. And in between each one of these ribs, we're wedging a heavy, a heavy diameter stick in between, pushing it into the ground. This really adds a lot of support to the house. Now that'll be additional support for the inner wall. Now the outer wall, we're just pushing sticks in also, and we're letting them loose. And then as we fill with whatever litter, leaves, sticks, rocks, grass, we'll pull those in and cinch them up. So this completes the framework of this particular shelter. Now we've pretty well chosen this site to put up a frame, some sort of lean-to, which most people are familiar with. That's what Scouts basically learn to use. And we've chosen this point. We're going to incorporate those trees in slightly. They won't be tied into part of the lean-to frame itself. You'll see as we go. We have a method of building lean-to, which makes real good use of our fire. So they're cleaning out the rocks right now, which are several thereof. And you note that we're on a rise. Water will shed from us. Grove or tree during the summer is not the place to build because of thunderstorms, lightning. But for our winter camp, this would work great. Now, this is the basic framework that we've got put up for this lean-to. Now our main supports are a Y-stick on the south side there, and that we got wedged into the ground and rocks piled around it to support it. And then real quick we'll come over to this other Y-stick. What we have here, we had rocks and roots get in the way, so we put two sticks up, which created a Y. And off of that, we have a straight pole going down to the rear on both sides. And this is our main support for the whole house. And then we came across on the V or Y created by that with another laid on top this pole here. We'll call that a north-south pole. And then we put two more across here, and we lashed these to hold them in place. Now stakes driven into the ground would have kept them from rolling down the roof of the shelter. Now to raise the back up slightly and give us room inside, we've placed a stump or log that we drug up and we're laying our sticks on top of this. Now our east-west poles here are to help hold the crooked, well, those are north-south poles. Those poles are to help support the crooked east-west poles, which run this way, and to keep them from falling through, so we have a flat surface inside our shelter. Now on top of this, of course, we'll decide what we're going to use for a water repellent or water resistant roof. Okay, we got framework up, and now we're going to go and place these materials to make it watertight as much as we can. This is what we're referring to as we're working as wiki up number 1. Stick someone together. You've seen the frame being made. Now what we're going to do on the door faces east. We're on the west side now, and from the doorway around to the south, we're going to cover up with what we have is a chatter cane, like corn stalks and just plain weeds that we've picked up, and then we're going to just lay sticks on top of that to use a larger material. And this will not shed water near as well as number 2, which we're going to go on the west side, swinging around to the north with leaves, forest floor debris, the litter. We're going to use grasses mixed. That's not hay, that's grass that we've pulled out of the ditches and brought up here. And we're going to mix it with this debris and litter that we've picked up from the forest. And that's going to cover side number 2. From there, when you go around to the north and then back around to the door, we're going to go with the cattails. We're going to be laying these up, and this will give probably the tightest water repellency. Now take notice as the stalks are placed in position, they're going on upside down because water will run downhill, and as it hits what is the bottom of the plant and then runs downhill in this manner, it'll run off points of contact, leaves, where leaves come out. If it was to go the other way, the water would stop and drip into your household, which we're trying to eliminate. Now just as water has a tendency to flow downhill, so does leaves, loose litter. So as we go up a couple feet, when the leaves start all falling down towards the bottom, put on some heavier sticks and logs, something to support what you have and create a layer, and then we'll start with another layer of leaves above it. Okay, cattails are kind of slippery, especially when they're wet, so we're stripping basswood bark to use as a lashing to hold these in place a bit as we go. The door we end up with really isn't much more than just a slit in the cattails that we'll go in and out on. And you can see the cattails on the front. weed portion onto your left. Real good covering of leaves and other litter. This will cover us on the west side mostly. Now you'll note plenty of limbs leaning up against everything to hold it in place. A good driving rain might not do too much damage, but if accompanied by a lot of wind, you've got real problems. Now at the top, you'll see when we go in the house, there's nothing. That's where smoke will have a chance to leave. Dark. That's where it's at right now. That's cattails we've been looking at. Inside now you're seeing through the leaves some little flickers of light, and more as we get over here towards our bigger brush. And of course our smoke hole. Well, the smoke hole must be working. Smoke's leaving somehow. A good fire. Oops, who's this? We can't stress enough the immediate importance of a small fire. Big fires ignite the house that you're in and you're gone. No fires at night, no fires. Very small fires. It doesn't take much to keep you warm. From wiki up number 1. To wiki up number 2. Now we intend to thatch for the most part with longer slewgrass that we've gathered. Most of the, or all of the roof and part of the sides. But to illustrate how you can utilize shorter, scrawnier material, we've elected to do the 2.5 feet of the sides using a different method. Now here we can use leaves interlaced with shorter pieces of grass, even small pieces of logs, small sticks, 3-4 inches in diameter, branches from trees. Long and stringy is desirable intermixed with our small crumbly type material. And then we'll compress these sides in and down as we go up. Now as we go up this wall, we're going to bring in a tie every once in a while to suck this wall in. Which compresses all our old moldy leaf matter and whatever we're working with. And we're doing our final cinching up of our lower sidewalls. Pretty darn airtight. Now at this stage, our house looks almost like a fur hat. Big earmuffs on. And the walls are finished, thicker than if we had thatched, and easily repairable. And now we're getting prepared to open up in bundles of long slough grass, and then we're going to put a roof on. First layer is almost all the way around. Geri's finishing up over on the north side. Bundles laid out makes it a little bit easier when you start putting them into place. Lashing with the basswood, the grass has some moisture in it, the bark has some moisture in it, and it can be shrinkage as it dries. And in that case, we'll end up going over it again, double lash it. Now if you notice, we go up, 3 layers of grass covers everything. The way it overlaps. So we've got 2 layers covering each of our ties to protect it from the elements. Of course, this basswood bark should hold up pretty well, but it'll all be pretty well protected. Well, things have changed a little bit at the roof since we visited it last. What we're doing is we got 2 layers of grass to go on, and to finish out at the top we could go straight over the old existing frame with our grass, or we could bunch it at the top. We've elected to build this cone out of green cedar, which we've lashed up, and we're going to lay our grass up. Our first tie, or our next tie of grass, is going to go to this frame, the top of the existing. And the one that follows that will be tied to the lower of the new hoop. And this will bring our grass bunch to the top. Moisture, of course, will come down through that hole, but not very much. This is what she looks like from out here before we get to tie into it. Nothing really fancy. Eventually you got to get up there to do some of this work. How you do it, you'll have to figure it out. Some sort of ladder. There's just a big old piece of driftwood that we can utilize as a ladder. We're laying in 2 courses of grass as a final. Just to get, that'll be the part of the house that really wants to leak the most, but we're going to try to prevent it. This is a pretty good view of basically what the chimney looks like. So here's the finished castle. Not really as much work involved in this as one would think, considering that we didn't use modern cordage, and though we did use steel for cutting our materials, we needn't have. We just did it for expediency of time. And plenty roomy. We'll go inside here in a second. You have to realize, though we have the chimney, so to speak, up there, that's the biggest hole of the whole place. Smoke will seep through all pores in the wall. Nothing is completely airtight. It's all relevant. It is waterproof. When you get in the wild, everything is rather relative. You might note that on the high sides, we've cut a drainage ditch in because water will shed from the house itself, but also runoff from the surrounding terrain will come down, and we have diversionary channels cut in that will divert this water from going through our living room. Well, let's go on in the house and see what Ma's got happening, to see how cozy this place is. Might have been lying to you, huh? Get his eyes adjusted to the dark. You'll notice in the first 2.5 feet or so of the wall, there'll be no light coming through. Completely airtight, light tight. And as we go up, you may notice some cracks coming through. Even the smoke hole seems pretty tight. Well, let's go on back to lean-to frame, and we'll do a quick little talk over what we're doing. First, we've got a lot of materials. Great big pile of litter. Ooh, wildcat. A large pile of litter from the forest floor. Here's some of our cordage material. Basswood that we'll be utilizing. Now this shelter won't require as much tying as what we've done on the last one. And there's a big old pile of loose grass. It's not big, long, straight stuff. It's just old wild grass we picked up greater ditches and pulled out of the fields. And a big pile of sticks, some little, some big. Kind of fill in some different places. We got some weeds over there. Let's kind of see what we're doing. We've been through building the frame here, but I made a comment earlier that we do things a little bit different with lean-to from what most people or Boy Scouts or whoever do. We like to really incorporate a fire with what we work with. And so immediately in front of our lean-to, what you see there from one end is the beginning of a wall, which is going to be a windbreak from the east. We built these last 3 shelters have been built with the backs to the west. This is the predominant direction of the wind is from the west. So the backs of the shelters are facing into the wind, and our doors facing to the east. Now, these upright sticks you see here, they will support the wall on the, well, this is the north end. Both ends of the lean-to will have a wall, and the east end is going to have a wall also, and you'll see in a second how that incorporates in to block the wind. Here we're looking at the south side of the lean-to, and here's those vertical sticks being filled up. It's like what we did on the bottom of the last wiki-up that we just finished, is we've got trash, various litter, just crushed between those sticks and pulled up tight. It will not shed water, all that will, but it's 6 inches thick, plus or minus, so it will shed quite a bit of water. But the walls don't need to shed water. It's the roof that needs to. To an extent the walls will from the driving rain. Walls need to block the wind. This is what this is. This is about, a third done. And there's that old cat sneaking in on us again. Oop, he says. That's our mouser. That brings us breakfast. And you'll see as we go, we'll fill up those spots. And those trees, those 2 trees right there, well, there are 2 trees that come out into 2 trees, so there's 4 trees. But these north and south walls and tie into those trees, and that narrows the corridor going into the front of the shelter, and so does really block the wind. And here is our east wall that we're in the process of building. Let's take a walk around and see just what this does. From this angle, you can see this, we're looking at it straight from the east. You can see where the wall is as wide as the lean-to itself. Alright, the benefit this does is we've narrowed down the front opening between those trees. So we'll have a narrow entrance to walk through either from the north or the south to enter in. The fireplace will be right between those 2 trees, in front of the lean-to. This fire will not be in the shelter as such, but it will be placed to reflect the heat back in. Now we're looking in tight from the south. Here's going to be our entranceway in, and here's that east wall. Incomplete yet. But our entranceway will be in here, and then between those 2 trees. Before we show you more, I suppose, we ought to just get to building. One wonders, how do you stack leaves 6 or 8 inches wide, 2 to 5 feet tall? Well, you build a wall out of other sticks. You intermix weeds, long weeds, grasses, cedar boughs. In between these sticks that we've got that are placed about 2 feet apart, 18 inches, 2 feet apart. And no, it's not going to last as long as a brick wall or 2x4 studded house. But if kept up, if you lived in this, you would be surprised at how long it would last. Regardless of the type of stick, this is a green shoot that we're able to bend, wrap around some, but we're lashing this in place. Some of these are not green, some are dead, and we'll just squeeze together and tighten up. Lashing will be better. It's not really necessary. You could lean logs up against it. Whatever it is takes to hold that wall in place. This is our south wall, the roof facing west. And you can just barely see our east wall up here. We'll take a walk around and see what we have. Now here again is our south wall. We're looking at it from southeast. And here's our east windbreak. Take a walk up here and see exactly how that looks now. Now we move down to the northeast corner. We're looking up, and the height of that east wall ideally should be the height of everything else, the top of the lean-to and the top of the side walls. So what we create is a chimney. That's what we live in. The fire sits in the chimney itself, and we're just right behind it in our house. Okay, now we've got our walls up. It's time to start thinking about covering the roof. Any place where we have a stick protruding up, water is going to come in. It's going to come down that stick and it's going to come inside. Period. There's no getting around that. So what we need to do is have our roof as free from anything that's sticking up that runs inside of our shelter. Now some of these sticks that you see sticking up support the outer wall that we built. So it will not hurt because the water draining down that will go outside the house. Now naturally we have many openings and holes in our roof. We don't even have the beginnings of a sunshade right now. Water is just going to shoot right on through that. We're after water tightness as much as possible. Now we have a pitch here that's not very steep, and so when we pile on materials we'll try to pile it heavier towards the front than the rear, so we'll increase the pitch. Water will run downhill. It's trying to go inside the house, we're trying to divert it to go off the back. Now it's time for us to start putting something on top. Try to keep out some of these elements. What we're going to do to fill these gaps up is first we're going to throw small stringy things, grass. Grass will help fill up these holes, and then we're going to pile bundle after bundle of leaves. Just fill them on top. Get it as deep as we can, and sticks. Now if we had long grasses, it would repel water better. Well, we're not using that here. We're showing what to do when you don't have long grasses. You just make it thicker. Once we have a good pile of grass to keep the leaves from going through, we start throwing leaves on. That's what's going to cover our house up. We start at the bottom. These want to roll downhill as much as water does. And we'll pile heavier and heavier towards the top. This we'll cover with sticks, more grass, and we'll wait till the first rain and see how well it works. And there's our finished house. Now this is a real good example of the importance of that east wall. You can see that smoke just pouring out, going over the top of the lean-to now. If we hadn't had that there, we'd had smoke blowing right into our faces. Of course, you could have turned it around and built with the back towards the east, but the wind's generally from the west, and then you're in trouble when the wind switches. Well, let's take a walk up here and see what's cooking. See how things are set up. Hope she's got more flames and smoke. Now notice between the ribs of these trees, we've replaced rocks. Our side walls come up like this one on the right, which hits this other tree. Yeah, the rocks just act as for preventative. Here's rocks on the opposite set of trees. You'll notice the hearth. Rocks prevent sparks from going in any direction, hopefully, and yet radiates heat to the inside. Well, this particular shelter here, what we refer to as Wiki Up number 1, really is the simplest to put together to construct of any of the shelters that we've done. One of the things I wanted to point out was we saw us utilize cattails and lean those up against there. Friction wants them to slide down. So as we lean these up, we laid them in, we laid sticks on top of it to keep them coming down. Eventually these are going to want to work down, we'll have to replace and keep shoving stuff up. Another method that we utilize, we have what we refer to as our portable shelter. It's a little wickiup frame, and we've sewn cattail mats together. And this was done all around the world by a lot of different peoples, and we use bark in this case again, and a bone needle, and sewed them up. Now tules can be used, which is a round cattail. Well, cattails being flatter shed more water than a round plant would do. Now we have 12 or 15 of these mats that Geri sewn together, and we carry and we just wrap these around a framework that we carry along for demonstrations. And you'd be surprised at how much water 2 layers of these would shed. Even one, it's surprising how much water one will shed. But 2 will almost, be as close to waterproof as you might want to get. 3 would definitely give you a waterproof shelter. And waterproof is pretty hard to find in a primitive situation. And one thing that all shelters have, basically have to have, is a shelter, an opening, a doorway, an entranceway to get in. But once we get inside of this shelter, cold air is wanting to draw through here, especially once we get a fire. And wind can disrupt your smoke from going out. So we need some sort of doorway. Now, on the shelters that we've constructed that you've seen that utilize grasses and cattails and different things, we've had a narrow opening that we kind of squeeze on through and shuffle through, so we don't have much to close up, but we'll show you a couple. One that we, real simple to do, is take some strips of bark and just tie some grass and leaves, tie them up into a bundle, and stick these up into your entranceway. And this, of course, can be done from the inside, probably easier than I'm doing it from the outside. And wedge that in place, and that'll pretty well, it will block the wind. And if you can bring grasses over the top of it, it will shed the water down also. Another pretty easy to find or to handle doorway or door closure could just simply be flat pieces of wood that you find in the forest or big pieces of bark. Here what we've got are just some half-round pieces of wood and found down in the timber. Again, 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these around, and you'll end up closing this house up real tight. Surprisingly warm and draft-free inside that. Well, we had warnings of a pretty good storm last night, which didn't really follow through. This particular shelter, the east end here wasn't tightened up in its final stages, and so some snow came in through the doorway, and so there was some scattered around inside. But it's just surprisingly dry inside. There's nothing. We had at least probably 3/4 of an inch of rain preceding this, which was supposed to have been snow, and then we've only got less than 2 inches of snow on top of it. But we came inside this, and this morning first thing, and she's really dry. Lean-to is really the more exposed of all the shelters, with the open front like it is. So naturally we'll have more snow on the inside. On the north side of the shelters is plumb dry. You can see slight coating, just this sugar coating of snow on the south side from where the wind blew in, which wouldn't really affect much for protection. Wiki up number 1, the quickest shelter of them all. Surprisingly dry on the inside. A little came in through the door, a little bit from the north side where it was forced around some of the cattails, but surprisingly dry. Wiki up number 2. Well, Geri and I spent the night in there. Probably close to 3/4 of an inch of rain. Whatever snow we happen to have here, closing in on 2 inches, maybe more. Not one drop of moisture on the inside. We had a real pleasant fire. Lasted us most of the evening. And smoke free on the inside. And as I say, not one drop of moisture inside.